300 years ago, one of the greatest financial bubbles in history burst in England, and among the ruins of that collapse stood a man no one expected to fall. His name is written at the top of every list of history's greatest minds, a man whose discoveries changed the very way we understand the universe. But there was one law he could never master, the law of human nature. Sir Isaac Newton. The man who measured the stars, who gave us gravity, light, and motion. The father of modern physics, a symbol of reason itself. But even Newton was human, and the cruel side of human nature would bring his brilliance to its knees. In 1720, Newton lost his entire fortune in the collapse of the South Sea bubble, one of the first and the most devastating stock market bubbles in history. Afterwards, he said the words that could echo for centuries. I can calculate the motions of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of man. This is not just an economic story. It is the story of reason colliding with emotion, of a genius undone by the same forces that still shape every market today, fear and greed. London's New World. The early 1700s. London was alive with energy. Coffee houses overflowed with merchants, bankers, and dreamers. Newspapers shouted about distant colonies, exotic goods, and endless opportunities. The empire was expanding. Ships crossed the oceans carrying silver, sugar, and secrets. Wealth was pouring in, but so were the debts. Britain had just emerged from the brutal wars in Europe. The crown's treasury was nearly empty. But the people were tired of war. They wanted excitement. They wanted something new, a way to get rich without blood or sweat. And they found it in the new miracle of the age, the stock market. For the first time, ordinary people believed they could become wealthy just by buying a piece of paper, a share. It was more than investment, it was a faith, a collective dream. At the center of that dream stood one name, whispered in every corner of London, the South Sea Company. The Company of Golden Seas. Founded in 1711, the South Sea Company promised to open trade routes to the riches of South America. It sounded perfect. Gold, silver, spices, entire worlds of profit. But, of course there is a but there was one problem. These territories were under Spanish control, meaning the trade they promised barely existed at all. What the South Sea Company sold wasn't reality, it was hope. It was a story, and a very good one. But people didn't care. They didn't want the truth. The idea of easy wealth spread like wildfire. Coffee houses turned into stock exchanges. Newspapers printed miracle stories every day. Your neighbor made a fortune overnight. Everyone is getting rich. And no one wanted to be left behind. In truth, the company had become something very different. It wasn't just about trade anymore. It was a financial illusion, crafted with the help of the British government itself. The company offered a new idea, revolutionary at the time. We will take over the government's massive debt in exchange for company shares. The logic was simple but seductive. If the company grew, everyone, even the nation, would prosper. Debt would vanish and wealth would rise. On paper, it looked like magic, and magic sells faster than gold. People sold their homes, their farms, their heirlooms to buy South Sea stock shares. A national fever had begun. And for a brief moment, it felt like England had discovered a new law of wealth, one even Newton couldn't write down. Newton enters the stage. At that time, the man responsible for England's money supply, the head of the Royal Mint, was none other than Isaac Newton. He understood gold, he understood value. He had spent his life calculating the mysteries of the universe. Surely he could understand markets. At first, Newton was cautious. In the early 1720, he bought a small amount of South Sea stock. The price was around £100. Months later, it tripled. Newton sold his shares, earning a profit of around £7,000. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's money. He was satisfied. I have made enough, he thought. This can't go any higher. But he was wrong, very wrong. Because soon the price doubled again, and again, and again. The limits of reason. Newton watched as his friends grew rich beyond imagination. Bankers, nobles, even servants, everyone was talking about South Sea stock. It was the only topic in London. People he considered less intelligent than himself were now wealthier than he could ever be, and that bothered him. He resisted for a time, trying to remain logical, but logic is no match for envy. Eventually, Newton gave in. He re entered the market, this time with almost his entire fortune. But this was no longer a market driven by reason, it was a frenzy, a collective dream turning into a collective trap. Newton, the master of mathematics, was now investing with emotion, and emotion has no formula. The days of collapse. By the summer of 1720, the South Sea stock had reached £1,000 per share. It seemed unstoppable. People believed in it as if it were destiny itself. London's streets buzzed with greed. Fortunes were made overnight. Bankers shouted numbers through windows. Servants ran errands with stock orders, and in coffee houses, the sound of coins never stopped. But the higher the dream, the thinner the air. Rumors began to spread. The company had no profits. The trade deals were fake. And just like that, the magic vanished. Within weeks, panic took over. The price fell from 1,000 to 500, then 300, then 150. Thousands went bankrupt. Some fled the country, some ended their own lives. And a nation awoke from its fever to find itself ruined. Newton's loss was enormous. It was about £20,000, roughly $3 million today. And that's when he spoke those immortal words. I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of man. The silence of a genius. After that collapse, Newton never invested again. He withdrew from society, back to his experiments, his solitude, and his silence. But the wound ran deep. He had unlocked the secrets of the cosmos, yet he couldn't solve the simplest human equation, desire. The South Sea disaster destroyed more than wealth. It shattered Britain's confidence. Thousands of families lost everything, but out of that chaos, something new emerged. The government introduced strict financial regulations. The early forms of central banking began to take shape. In a strange way, Newton's laws helped build the foundations of modern finance. He paid the price so others can learn the rules. Newton's laws in our time. Centuries have passed, but the pattern hasn't changed, only the names. South Sea became the dot-com bubble, then came crypto, then NFTs. The dream is always the same, a shortcut to wealth, and the ending always identical. Bubbles grow, hopes inflate, and when they burst, people say, this time was different. But it never is. Because human nature never changes. Newton's story is really our story. It is the endless struggle between reason and emotion, between knowledge and belief, between brilliance and greed. He could calculate the motion of the stars, but never the madness of the crowd. And maybe that's why, even today, every financial story ends with the same equation. Knowledge is power, but passion always spreads faster. And here we have come to the end of our story. If you like my video, subscribe to my channel for more fascinating stories about financial history. I hope to see you in our next video, which will be about another fascinating story. Till then, take care.